The final meal is a solemn tradition meant to provide condemned prisoners one last moment of comfort and dignity before execution. Most inmates choose meaningful foods that remind them of home, family, or happier times. But some death row inmates used their final meal request to order the absolute dumbest, most baffling combinations of food that made everyone question their judgment one last time. 1. An inmate in Texas requested a single olive with the pit still in it, and nothing else for his entire final meal. Prison officials confirmed he wanted specifically one olive, not a jar or handful, just a single olive. The request was so minimal that officials asked multiple times if he wanted to add anything else. He insisted that one olive was his complete and total final meal preference. The symbolism was never explained and remains a mystery to this time. Guards delivered a single olive on a plate, which he ate in about 3 seconds. The execution proceeded after the briefest final meal in state history. Psychological evaluations suggested he was making some kind of statement nobody understood. His last meal cost approximately 8 cents to provide. 2. A Florida inmate ordered a birthday cake for someone else who wasn't present and refused to eat any himself. The cake was supposed to be for his former cellmate whose birthday happened to fall on the execution date. He requested the cake be decorated with specific messages and delivered to the other prisoner. Prison policy didn't allow transferring meals to other inmates. The cake sat untouched in his cell while he ate nothing before execution. Officials were baffled by using the final meal privilege for someone else's benefit. The gesture was touching but resulted in him dying hungry. His cellmate never received the cake due to regulations. The tradition exists for the condemned person, not for gift-giving purposes. 3. An Oklahoma inmate requested dirt from his childhood backyard, saying he wanted to taste home one more time. The request was denied immediately because eating dirt isn't food and posed health risks. He argued that dirt was natural and people ate it historically. Prison officials explained they couldn't fulfill requests for non-food items regardless of reasoning. He became angry that his meaningful symbolic request was rejected. His backup request was equally strange, asking for grass clippings from the prison yard. That was also denied, leading to him receiving a standard institutional meal. He protested by refusing to eat anything prison staff brought him. His execution proceeded on an empty stomach because he demanded inedible materials. 4. A Georgia inmate ordered 12 identical hamburgers from McDonald's and ate only the pickles off each one. The burgers were delivered as requested from a nearby McDonald's location. He systematically removed pickles from all 12 burgers and ate only those. The remaining hamburger components were left completely untouched. Guards estimated he ate about $3 worth of pickles from $70 worth of food. The wastefulness was noted in official records documenting the execution. Nobody could determine why he ordered full burgers just for the pickles. Requesting just pickles would have been cheaper and less wasteful. His peculiar eating method became a story guards told for years afterward. 5. A Tennessee inmate requested foods that were completely out of season, requiring expensive specialty sourcing. Fresh strawberries in January, along with corn on the cob in March, were demanded. The prison attempted to source these items, but costs were astronomical. State regulations limited final meal budgets to reasonable amounts. He was offered alternatives that were in season and available. He refused all substitutions, insisting on the exact out-of-season items. The standoff resulted in him receiving a basic prison meal instead. His stubbornness about seasonal availability cost him any special final meal. The execution proceeded after he complained about the unfairness of agricultural seasons. 6. An Alabama inmate ordered a meal from a restaurant chain that didn't exist in the state or region. He insisted on food from a West Coast chain with no locations within 800 miles. Prison officials explained the impossibility of fulfilling this geographical request. He suggested they have it shipped overnight, which violated time and budget constraints. Alternative similar restaurants were proposed but rejected. He claimed only that specific chains' food would satisfy him. The logistics of interstate fast food delivery for an execution were absurd. He received a standard meal after his unrealistic demands couldn't be met. His final complaint was about the limited restaurant options in Alabama. 7. A Missouri inmate requested a wedding feast for 12 people despite being executed alone. The elaborate multi-course meal was planned for a dozen guests who didn't exist. He provided a full seating chart with names of people who weren't attending. Prison regulations limited meals to the condemned individual only. He argued the tradition should accommodate his vision of a final celebration. Officials explained executions aren't social events with dinner parties. He scaled down to requesting place settings for imaginary guests. That was also denied, resulting in a single standard portion. His execution fantasy involved entertaining guests who were never coming. 8. An Arkansas inmate ordered baby food claiming his teeth hurt too much for solid food. Dental records showed he had perfectly functional teeth with no issues. He demanded jars of pureed fruits and vegetables like an infant would eat. Prison medical staff confirmed he could chew normal food without problems. His insistence on baby food had no medical justification. Psychiatrists suggested this was regression behavior before execution. He was offered soft foods like mashed potatoes as compromise. He refused anything except jarred baby food. Standard meal was provided, which he ate normally, proving teeth were fine. The baby food request remains unexplained to this day. 9. A Virginia inmate requested foods that, when combined, would cause immediate violent illness. The combination of milk, citrus, and seafood was medically inadvisable. Prison medical staff warned the mixture would cause severe gastrointestinal distress. He insisted this was intentional and his right to request. Officials debated whether knowingly serving sickening food was appropriate. Ethical concerns about making someone ill before execution arose. The meal was modified to remove the most problematic combinations. He protested the interference with his deliberately nauseating selection. His plan to be violently sick before execution was thwarted by medical intervention. 10. A Louisiana inmate ordered nothing but condiments, requesting ketchup, mustard, mayonnaise, and relish with no actual food. Prison staff asked what the condiments were supposed to go on. He claimed he would eat them straight from the containers. The request for condiments without food items confused everyone involved. Officials brought bread, assuming condiments needed application to something. He sent the bread back demanding only the sauces. Watching him eat spoonfuls of mayonnaise and ketchup disturbed the guards. The unusual meal was technically fulfilled, though extremely unpleasant. His reasoning for the condiment-only meal was never articulated clearly. 11. An Indiana inmate requested a meal that would take 8 hours to prepare properly. The elaborate French dish required extensive cooking time, exceeding execution schedules. Prison kitchen staff couldn't accommodate the timing requirements. He insisted authentic preparation was essential and wouldn't accept shortcuts. The dish was impossible within the time frame between meal request and execution. He was offered similar dishes with faster preparation times. All alternatives were rejected for not being the specific time-intensive recipe. Standard meal was served when his demands proved logistically impossible. His execution proceeded despite complaints about rushed culinary preparation standards. 12. A Mississippi inmate ordered only foods that were white in color for unexplained reasons. White bread, mashed potatoes, vanilla ice cream, and milk comprised the monochromatic meal. Guards asked about the color requirement, but received no explanation. The visually uniform meal looked bizarre on the plate. Speculation arose about symbolic meaning that was never confirmed. He ate the entirely white meal without commenting on it. Psychologists later debated whether the color choice had significance. The execution proceeded after the strangely uniform-colored final meal. His motivation for the all-white food selection remains a mystery. 13. A Kentucky inmate requested fast food from 5 different competing restaurants simultaneously. The logistical nightmare of coordinating multiple restaurant orders was significant. He wanted specific items from each chain served together. Traffic and timing made simultaneous delivery nearly impossible. Some items would be cold by the time others arrived. He refused to prioritize or choose one restaurant. Prison staff scrambled to fulfill the multi-restaurant request. The meal arrived piecemeal over 30 minutes. Half was cold and unappetizing by the time everything was delivered. His insistence on variety resulted in everything being mediocre quality. 14. A North Carolina inmate ordered the most expensive items from fine dining restaurants, exceeding any reasonable budget. Lobster, caviar, truffles, and rare wines were requested. The total cost would have exceeded $2,000 for a single meal. State regulations capped final meal expenses at much lower amounts. He argued his life's value justified unlimited spending. Officials explained taxpayer funds had limits regardless of circumstances. He called the budget restrictions cruel and unusual punishment. Standard meal was provided when luxury requests were denied. His execution proceeded after complaints about fiscal responsibility during death penalty. 15. An Arizona inmate requested foods he was severely allergic to according to medical records. The meal included shellfish, nuts, and dairy, despite documented allergies. Prison medical staff refused to serve potentially fatal allergens. He claimed he wanted to die from allergies, not execution. Officials explained that wasn't how final meals worked. His request to trigger anaphylaxis was denied on medical grounds. Alternative meal suggestions were all rejected. Standard institutional food was served instead. His attempt to die from food allergies rather than execution failed completely. 16. A California inmate ordered a meal so large it would require 3 people to finish. The quantities requested included multiple entrees, sides, and desserts totaling thousands of calories. Prison staff questioned whether he understood portion sizes. He insisted on massive amounts of every item. The delivered meal covered an entire table. He managed to eat about 15% before becoming too full. The massive waste was documented and criticized. California later changed final meal policies partially because of this excess. His eyes were much bigger than his stomach for the final meal. 17. A Nevada inmate requested only energy drinks and candy, creating a pure sugar meal. Red Bull, Mountain Dew, and bags of candy comprised his selection. Nutritional value was 0 and sugar content was dangerous. Prison medical staff warned about the health effects. He claimed he wanted the caffeine and sugar rush. The meal provided no sustenance, just stimulation. He became jittery and hyperactive before execution. Guards noted his unusual energy state during final preparations. His sugar crash coincided with the execution procedures beginning. 18. An Ohio inmate ordered raw ingredients instead of prepared food, saying he'd cook it himself. Raw chicken, uncooked rice, and vegetables were requested. Prison regulations prohibited inmates from accessing cooking facilities. He claimed cooking his own final meal was therapeutic. Officials explained security concerns prevented this arrangement. He argued culinary preparation was meaningful to him. The raw ingredients were cooked by prison staff instead. He complained the preparation wasn't how he would have done it. His request to personally cook was denied for obvious security reasons. 19. A South Carolina inmate requested novelty foods from specific decades, no longer manufactured. Discontinued snack foods from the 1970s and 80s were demanded. The products hadn't been made in 30 years. Prison staff couldn't source items that no longer existed. He provided specific brand names and flavors. Research confirmed the items were permanently discontinued. Modern equivalents were offered but rejected. He insisted only the original formulations would suffice. Standard meal was served when time travel proved impossible. His nostalgia for discontinued foods couldn't be satisfied. 20. A Pennsylvania inmate ordered food from his specific ethnic heritage but described it wrong. He requested dishes by wrong names with incorrect ingredients listed. Prison consulted cultural experts who identified the errors. He became defensive when corrections were suggested. The meal prepared wasn't actually the cultural dish he intended. He ate it anyway, not realizing it wasn't authentic. Guards who knew the cuisine noticed the mistakes. His attempt at meaningful cultural connection failed due to misinformation. The execution proceeded after the incorrectly ordered ethnic meal. 21. A Wyoming inmate requested foods that contradicted each other in temperature. Hot soup and ice cream to be served simultaneously was demanded. The combination meant one would be wrong temperature. He insisted both must be served at optimal temperatures. Physics and timing made this impossible. Prison staff delivered both, but ice cream had melted. He complained about the thermodynamic impossibility not being overcome. Alternative serving suggestions were all rejected. His final meal highlighted basic physics problems. The execution continued despite temperature-related disappointments. 22. A Maryland inmate ordered food specifically because he hated them. Brussels sprouts, liver, and beets were selected deliberately. Guards asked why he'd choose disliked foods. He claimed he wanted to remember why he hated them. The psychological reasoning made no sense to officials. He forced himself to eat foods he found disgusting. Staff watched him grimace through the self-imposed unpleasant meal. His final culinary experience was deliberately negative. The execution proceeded after the voluntarily terrible meal. His reasoning for choosing hated foods was never adequately explained. 23. A New Mexico inmate requested a meal that was a fire hazard, requiring flambe preparation. The theatrical cooking technique wasn't possible in prison environment. Fire safety regulations prohibited open flames in cells. He insisted on authentic tableside preparation. Prison kitchen couldn't accommodate dramatic presentation requirements. Alternative preparation methods were suggested. He refused the meal if it wasn't prepared with fire. Standard food was served when pyrotechnic cooking proved impossible. His demand for dinner theater in prison was unrealistic. 24. An Illinois inmate ordered authentic foreign cuisine requiring ingredients unavailable in America. The regional dish from a remote area needed local specialized components. Importing the ingredients was impossible within timeframes and budgets. He claimed only authentic preparation was acceptable. Prison staff researched substitutions and approximations. Every alternative was rejected as inauthentic. He wrote detailed complaints about ingredient sourcing limitations. Standard meal was provided when international supply chains failed. His expectations for globally sourced authentic cuisine were unreasonable. 25. A Colorado inmate requested molecular gastronomy, requiring specialized equipment the prison didn't have. Foam, spherification, and liquid nitrogen techniques were specified. The avant-garde cooking methods needed professional culinary equipment. Prison kitchens had basic institutional cooking gear only. He described the exact techniques after watching cooking shows. Staff couldn't replicate molecular gastronomy in prison. He rejected traditionally prepared alternatives. Standard institutional meal was served instead. His final meal ambitions exceeded available culinary technology significantly. 26. A West Virginia inmate ordered food he claimed his grandmother made, but described a recipe that didn't exist. The nostalgic request was for a dish that couldn't be identified. Efforts to research the recipe found nothing matching his description. He insisted his grandmother made it regularly. Family members contacted confirmed no such dish existed. He became upset when reality contradicted his memory. The meal couldn't be prepared because it apparently never existed. Standard food was served instead. His final meal was based on a false or confused memory. 27. An Oregon inmate requested menu items from fictional restaurants seen in movies and TV shows. The establishments didn't exist in reality, only in entertainment. He provided specific fictional franchise names. Prison staff explained fictional restaurants couldn't fulfill orders. He argued they should recreate the fictional foods. Nobody knew what the imaginary menu items actually were. His confusion between fiction and reality was concerning. A standard meal was provided when movie restaurants proved inaccessible. The execution proceeded after the reality of fictional establishments was explained. 28. A Washington inmate ordered foods arranged in specific geometric patterns on the plate. The artistic presentation requirements were extremely detailed. He provided diagrams showing exact placement of each item. Prison kitchen staff weren't trained in food artistry. The meal was prepared, but presentation didn't match specifications. He refused to eat because arrangement was wrong. Guards convinced him to eat despite imperfect geometry. His obsession with food placement overshadowed the actual eating. The execution continued after the geometrically disappointing meal. 29. A Kansas inmate requested foods that were politically controversial or protested. Veal, foie gras, and other ethically debated foods were chosen. He claimed he wanted to make a statement. Animal rights activists protested his final meal choices. The controversy was apparently his intention. Prison provided the legal but controversial foods. Media coverage focused on his deliberately provocative selections. His final act was generating outrage about food ethics. The execution proceeded amid protests about his meal choices. 30. An Iowa inmate ordered competitive eating contest quantities, claiming he wanted to go out on a food challenge. Dozens of hot dogs, pizzas, and pies were requested like eating competition. The competitive eating volume was physically impossible for any human to consume. Prison staff explained nobody could eat those quantities regardless of training. He insisted he'd trained for this moment and could do it. The absurd amounts were reduced to reasonable portions despite his protests. He barely finished normal portions, proving his competitive eating claims were completely false. His fantasy of dying after winning an eating contest was unrealistic. The execution continued after his eating contest ambitions failed miserably. Prison officials noted the request showed disconnect from physical reality. His family said he'd never shown interest in competitive eating before. The case illustrated grandiose final fantasies that couldn't be realized. 31. A Delaware inmate requested foods from a specific date decades ago, trying to recreate an exact historical meal. The recreation required knowing what was served at a restaurant in 1973. Historical records didn't document restaurant menus that specifically from 50 years ago. He claimed perfect recreation was essential to reliving a happy memory. Prison staff had no way to research 50-year-old restaurant menus. Every attempt to approximate was rejected as not historically accurate. He wanted time travel through food which wasn't possible. Standard meal was served when historical recreation proved impossible. His execution followed the failed attempt to recreate the past through dining. Prison officials noted nostalgia was common, but exact recreation was impossible. His family provided some details but couldn't remember exact dishes. The case illustrated the impossibility of perfectly recreating past experiences. 32. A Montana inmate ordered only garnishes requesting parsley, lemon wedges, and decorative vegetables with no actual meal. Prison staff asked what the garnishes were supposed to accompany. He claimed garnishes were sufficient food and needed nothing else. The request for purely decorative food items was bizarre to everyone. Officials brought actual food along with garnishes, assuming error. He insisted on eating only the garnishes, refusing actual food. Watching him eat decorative parsley and lemon rinds disturbed staff. His final meal was technically food but not intended for consumption. The unusual choice of decorative elements over food was never explained. Prison officials documented the bizarre garnish-only meal. His execution proceeded after the consumption of decorative items. 33. A New Hampshire inmate requested foods that required special religious preparation he didn't practice. Kosher and halal foods were demanded despite him not being Jewish or Muslim. Prison chaplains confirmed he had no religious affiliation historically. He claimed sudden religious conversion right before execution. Officials questioned the timing and sincerity of conversion. The foods were prepared according to religious standards anyway, respecting claims. He complained they tasted the same as regular food. His last-minute religious food demands seemed opportunistic, not sincere. The execution proceeded after the questionably motivated religious meal. Prison officials noted they honored religious requests even when suspicious. His family confirmed no previous religious observance in his life. The case raised questions about last-minute religious conversions and food. 34. A South Dakota inmate ordered appetizers, only refusing any main course or entree completely. Multiple starters from different cuisines were requested as entire meal. Staff asked about skipping the main course. He claimed appetizers were superior to entrees in every way. The grazing-style meal was unusual but provided as requested. He ate small amounts of many different things, never feeling satisfied. The lack of substantial food left him hungry after meal. His strategy of variety over substance was questioned by staff. The execution continued after the appetizer-only meal left him unsatisfied. Prison officials noted a balanced meal would have been more satisfying. His final complaint was about still being hungry. The case illustrated poor meal planning strategies. 35. A Rhode Island inmate requested sauce-only meals, ordering just gravy, salsa, and soup broths without solids. No solid foods were included in the request at all. Prison staff clarified he wanted only liquid components. He confirmed liquid only was his intention for entire meal. The meal was technically provided but nutritionally pointless. Drinking gravies and broths without food items was strange. He complained about being hungry after the liquid meal. His liquid-only strategy was poor planning for final meal. The execution proceeded despite post-meal hunger complaints. Prison officials noted liquids don't provide satisfaction like solid food. His family said he'd always made poor dietary choices. The case illustrated the difference between hydration and actual eating. 36. A Connecticut inmate ordered a meal entirely of foods that start with the letter Q, creating impossible restrictions. The alphabetical restriction severely limited options available. Quail and quiche were about the only options available. He insisted on multiple Q foods, though few existed. Prison staff researched food dictionaries, finding almost nothing. The arbitrary letter limitation made meal planning absurd. He ate quail and quiche, then complained about limited options. His alphabetical food game was self-defeating by design. The execution continued after the unnecessarily restrictive meal. Prison officials noted arbitrary restrictions ruined his meal opportunity. His insistence on the letter Q made no sense. The case illustrated self-imposed limitations that served no purpose. 37. An Alaska inmate requested tropical foods completely unavailable in the state during winter months. Fresh pineapple, coconuts, and exotic fruits were demanded in January. The geographic and seasonal availability made this nearly impossible. Shipping costs would have exceeded budget limitations significantly. He refused alternatives that were actually available locally. Prison staff did their best with frozen substitutes. He rejected everything as not fresh or authentic enough. Standard meal was served when tropical perfection couldn't be achieved. His execution followed complaints about Alaska's agricultural limitations. Prison officials noted geography and climate couldn't be changed. His expectations were completely unrealistic for the location. The case illustrated disconnect between desires and geographic reality. 38. A Hawaii inmate requested continental European foods completely out of place on the island. German sausages and Swiss cheese from specific regions were demanded. The specificity required international shipping impossible to arrange. Local Hawaiian alternatives were suggested and refused. He wanted European authenticity in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Prison staff couldn't create Europe in Hawaii on short notice. Standard meal was provided when geographic reality intervened. His execution proceeded after European food demands couldn't be met. Prison officials explained island limitations on food sourcing. His insistence on European authenticity was unrealistic. The case showed the challenges of geographic isolation. 39. A Vermont inmate ordered foods known to cause drowsiness, hoping to sleep through the execution. Turkey, warm milk, and other tryptophan-rich foods were selected deliberately. Prison medical staff noted the attempted self-medication through food. He admitted trying to make himself sleepy through food choices. Officials explained executions proceeded regardless of drowsiness levels. The sleep-inducing meal was only partially effective. He was drowsy but conscious during final procedures. His culinary sleeping pill attempt failed to achieve goals. The execution continued despite food-based sedation efforts. Prison officials noted the approach was creative but ineffective. His plan to sleep through execution didn't work. The case illustrated futile attempts to escape consciousness. 40. A Maine inmate requested foods that would make him extremely thirsty without requesting beverages. Salty chips, dried meats, and spicy foods were ordered. No drinks were included in the request at all. He deliberately created dehydration before execution. Prison staff asked about beverages multiple times. He refused all drink offers, creating discomfort. The painful thirst was apparently intentional self-punishment. Medical staff monitored for dangerous dehydration levels. His self-imposed suffering through dehydration was concerning. Prison officials eventually provided water despite his refusal. His execution proceeded with him uncomfortably thirsty. The case illustrated self-destructive behavior continuing until end. 41. An Idaho inmate ordered only condiment packets in sealed containers, eating dozens of ketchup and mustard packets. The condiments weren't even opened or applied to anything. He ate the contents of individual sauce packets methodically. Guards estimated he consumed 50 packets of various condiments. The sodium content was dangerous and made him sick. Medical staff intervened when he became nauseous. His packet-eating binge was voluntarily self-destructive. The execution timing was adjusted due to condiment-induced illness. His bizarre condiment consumption remains unexplained. Prison officials noted the sodium intake was dangerous. His execution proceeded after recovery from condiment illness. The case became infamous for sheer strangeness. 42. A Nebraska inmate requested foods he'd never tried before, wanting new experiences before death. The adventure-eating approach meant requesting unfamiliar cuisines. He had no idea if he'd like what was ordered. Multiple exotic foods arrived that he found disgusting. His culinary adventure resulted in hating everything served. The strategy of trying new things backfired completely. He spent his final meal disappointed by unknown foods. Standard alternatives were eventually provided. His exploratory approach to final meals was risky and unsuccessful. Prison officials noted familiar favorites would have been wiser. His execution proceeded after the disappointing food adventure. The case illustrated the risk of trying new things at wrong time. 43. A North Dakota inmate ordered children's menu items from family restaurants requesting chicken nuggets and mac and cheese. The childish food selection surprised prison officials. He insisted on kid-sized portions with toy inclusions. Prison staff removed toys for security reasons. He complained about the missing children's meal prizes. His regression to childhood dining confused psychologists. The juvenile meal satisfied him more than adult options would have. His execution followed the children's menu meal. The psychological implications of requesting kids' meals were debated. Prison officials noted the regression to childhood was common. His family said he'd always been immature. The case illustrated psychological coping through regression. 44. A Wisconsin inmate requested breakfast foods to be served at dinner time, insisting on the wrong meal timing. Pancakes, eggs, and bacon were demanded for evening meal. Prison explained breakfast could be served at any time. He wanted breakfast specifically because it was wrong for dinner. The arbitrary timing rule he created made no sense. Breakfast was served in evening as requested. He ate the chronologically inappropriate meal contentedly. His temporal food rules were entirely self-imposed. The execution proceeded after the evening breakfast. Prison officials noted time of day didn't matter for food. His insistence on wrong timing was pointless. The case illustrated arbitrary rules serving no purpose. 45. And finally, a Massachusetts inmate requested absolutely nothing, refusing any final meal entirely, then complained extensively about being hungry before his execution. Prison officials offered meals multiple times with various options. He rejected everything, insisting he wanted nothing. Staff documented his repeated refusals of food. Hours before execution, he began complaining about extreme hunger. Guards reminded him he'd refused meals multiple times. He claimed this was different and demanded food immediately. Kitchen staff rushed to prepare something quickly. He criticized the hastily prepared meal as inadequate. His complaints intensified about the quality of emergency food. Officials pointed out he'd created this situation by refusing earlier meals. He demanded better food despite the time constraints he'd caused. The rushed meal couldn't match quality of planned final meals. His anger about hunger was entirely self-inflicted. He spent final hours complaining about predictable consequences of his own refusal to eat. Prison staff maintained detailed records of every meal offer and refusal. His family later tried to blame prison for inadequate final meal. Documentation proved he'd rejected every reasonable opportunity to eat. The execution proceeded with him still complaining about hunger he'd chosen. His final words included criticism of prison food service he'd refused to use. The absurdity of starving yourself, then blaming others, became part of his legacy. Guards who worked the execution remembered him for the stupid hunger complaints. His case became training material about final meal procedures and documentation. The self-imposed starvation followed by indignant complaints exemplified terrible decision-making. Years later, staff still discussed the inmate who chose hunger, then acted victimized by it, proving that even when facing death, some people's worst enemy is their own spectacularly poor judgment, demonstrating that final meal stupidity isn't always about what people choose to eat, but sometimes about refusing to eat anything. Then acting shocked when predictable hunger arrives, showing that the dumbest final meal decision might not be ordering wrong food, but rather ordering nothing. Then spending your last hours on Earth complaining about a problem you deliberately created for yourself through stubborn refusal to accept help when it was repeatedly offered. These final meal disasters prove that even facing execution doesn't necessarily produce wise decision-making or reasonable food choices. Subscribe if you found these final meal failures as absurd as we did. And remember that when given one last request, maybe just order something you'll actually enjoy eating instead of creating weird problems for yourself and everyone else involved.